Welcome to the Omilla Quilt Coat Sew-Along. You can find the pattern on the Sewillow website and Etsy store. For this version of the quilt coat, I wanted to make the quote from upcycled fabric sewn together into a patchwork quilt. For the fabrics, I chose thrifted chinos as well as leftover scrap linen pieces from my Blossomia Sun Hat project. I am making a size 8 coat with no variations from the pattern. I cut all my fabric into 5-inch squares. The pattern provides details on which size quilt you need to make. To make a large enough quilt, I needed around 130 squares. I started by chain stitching random squares with right sides together using a 1/4-inch seam allowance. I then laid my joined squares onto my quilt wadding to ensure I was happy with the fabric placement. Then I sewed the pairs into squares and started joining the squares into rows. With the piecing done, I used a steam press to neaten the quilt top, but a regular iron will do nicely. For basting the quilt layers, I used basting spray as in my velvet dressing gown sew-along video. Once I sprayed the back of the quilt top and the back of the backing fabric, I sandwiched the layers together on our bed, smoothing out the creases before firmly pressing down to secure the layers together. For quilting, I opted to quilt vertical lines. I make sure to roll the excess fabric under the arm of the machine. I always quilt from the center of the quilt outwards, and I use a walking foot on my machine. If you're making your own bias tape, once you've cut the strips, here's a quicker way to fold and press the strips. Place a pin into a towel or some fabric, leaving an empty gap that is the width you would like your binding to be. Start by pressing the binding, then thread it under the pin. As you continue to pull the binding under the pin, with a bit of guidance you can fold the edges and press as you pull the fabric through. Once the quilting is done and your bias tape is ready, it's time to start cutting the pattern pieces using the cutting guide on the pattern instructions. Remember to cut your notches. I have this handy little notch cutting tool. Also remember that you will need to flip your pattern pieces because it's difficult to cut on the fold of quilted fabric. Starting with the pocket pieces, attach the bias tape from the right side of the fabric, doing the top curved edge first. Take it to the machine and after stitching, fold your metered corner. Continue stitching the binding to the pocket edge, metering the corners. At the end, fold the top of the binding tape under and fold the binding over to the wrong side to pin in place. Stitch in the ditch from the right side of the pocket to catch the back binding. Using the pattern placement guide, pin the finished pockets to the front and stitch all around along the stitch line. Now you can start putting together the coat pieces. First are the shoulder seams. Once you have sewn the shoulder seams, finish them with the bias tape. Folding open your shoulder seams with right sides facing, match the notches on one of the armholes to the notches on the curved edge of one of the sleeves, easing the curves of the sleeves to the curve of the armholes. I recommend pins instead of clips to allow this extra ease of the sleeve head to fit the armhole. Stitch the sleeves in place and finish the armhole seams with the bias tape and put the piece aside. Next, we're going to sew together the hood pieces. Ease the straight edge of the back hood panel onto the curve of one of the side hood pieces. Repeat the process with the second side hood panel to join it to the other straight side of the back hood panel. Then finish your hood seams with the bias tape as before. At this point, I like to pin the underarm seams to make sure I'm happy with the fit and the length and to see how the piece is coming together. Lay the joined coat pieces flat with the right side up. Place the hood pieces with their right side facing down and align the neckline of the hood with the neckline of the coat. Be sure not to confuse the opening side of the hood with the hood neckline. The notches on the back of the neck should match the seams of the hood pieces. Once stitched in place, finish your neck seam with the bias tape as before. With the inside of the coat turned out, match up the underarm seams, pinning the side seams and the sleeve seams together. Start sewing from the underarm seam out to the sleeve edge, and then from the underarm seam again down to the lower edge of the side seam. and then finish those seams with the bias tape. We're nearing the finish line now. Check you are happy with the sleeve length. I like mine to be long enough to fold up. To finish the sleeve openings with bias tape, I remove the free arm of my machine so that I can fit the sleeve around the edge of my machine. Pin the bias tape around and join where the ends meet. Then continue to wrap the edge with the tape before stitching again to secure the bias tape. For the penultimate step, you need to finish all of the front opening edges with the bias tape. Start at one of the side seams and pin the tape all around the whole front opening side, including the hood opening. Take care to ease the tape around the curves. Pin or mark where the ends of the bias tape meet and join at that point before continuing to sew your bias tape in place. I like to press my quilt coats on a steam press or just iron the bias edges. For closures, I chose to make thin tubes which I knotted into Chinese knots. There are some brilliant videos out there on YouTube, and attached as a set of 3 to the front of my Omilla hooded quilt coat. And there you have it. I hope you enjoy making this. Remember that the Omilla hooded quilt coat pattern also works brilliantly with blankets and felted fabrics. I hope you found this sew along video useful. Let me know which of my other patterns you'd most love to have a sew along video for next.